Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1 year week of Complete with DLC. I'm one of your hosts, Griffin, and sitting across from me is my other co-host, Brad Knight. And what we decided to do for our 1 year was do a week of special stuff for you. And so we thought, for our 1 year, maybe you guys should get to know us more, and we'd do our 5 favorite games of all time. Now, is this the definitive list of our 5 favorite games? No. We're human beings. We change all the time. We change our minds. So, who knows? Next week, this list could be completely different. But as of now, who knows? Maybe we'll revisit this topic in the future and see if our lists have changed. As of now, these are the list of our 5 favorite games. So Brad, did you have trouble making this list? Because I kind of did.
No, this list was very, very easy for me to make. In fact, well, I should say that my list has changed, actually, within the last few months. So there's a rather recent addition to this list. If you had asked me like 6 months ago to make this list, there would be one different game on here than what I have now. But for the most part, I've had a pretty firm grasp on what my favorite games are.
Well, I'm kind of excited to get into this, Brad. So do you want to start or do you want me to start?
You know what? Why don't you lead off, Jacob?
All right. So my number 5 game is Rock Band 3. Now, Rock Band 3 may, to some people, be the worst game ever made just because they don't like music, which would be a weird thing, or they're just not good at it. For me, right, I'm not that great at Rock Band, but it's the experience of Rock Band and the way that it brings people together in a situation that is like no other game to me. Like, you can just pull out Rock Band and somehow everybody in the room wants to get involved, right? I picked Rock Band 3 specifically because while it's not totally different from any of the other Rock Bands, I think that most of all, this is supposed to be our favorite games, but this is also maybe supposed to be recommending games to people that they could play. And I think that if you're going to play Rock Band 3 is kind of the definitive version of that. It added the keyboard, it added the multiple vocals that were in Beatles Rock Band, but now came over to regular Rock Band. I think its set list is pretty great. It's probably one of the better Rock Band set lists. I think in all honesty, it's like 1 then 3. So and you can move all those songs over from 1 and 2 anyway. And there's all these DLC songs. I just think that if you're looking for a great experience to play with friends, it's bar none one of the best ones that you can have in games.
It is the pinnacle of party game.
Yeah.
And then drinking game.
Exactly. When you're drunk, Rock Band is some of the most fun that you can have with a group of people ever. But yeah, so my number 5 is Rock Band 3. Brad, what is your number 5?
My bottom of the list, number 5, is Modern Warfare 2.
Oh.
Yes, I had a tough time choosing between this and Black Ops 1. Those are the two I was flip-flopping for the 5th spot. But I went with Modern Warfare 2 because that was the first game that really I jumped in to multiplayer. That really, playing with a party on Xbox Live was my biggest intention with Modern Warfare 2. With the first Modern Warfare, I played it mostly for the story. I did do some multiplayer stuff. I played a lot of the multiplayer, but it was mostly solo stuff. But with Modern Warfare 2, I really, really got into the competitive aspect of playing, shooters in general, or just competitive in general. It was really my first quote-unquote competitive game. I signed up to a website with a few buddies of mine, and we did 2s and 3s and 5s on this little matchmaking ladder, and it was a lot of fun. And really, I think it's probably my most played game on the Xbox 360 by probably a large margin.
I kept going back and forth with adding Black Ops to my list. It just got edged out by Rock Band. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Modern Warfare 2 is one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. I think it was the first PS3 game I ever had. When I got my PS3, that was the game that I got with it. And I just had a great time with it too. So I completely agree.
Yeah, Black Ops 1 almost won out because of the zombies and how much fun that multiplayer made zombies, but I decided to go with the origin of my multiplayer.
Fixation.
My fixation on it.
Yeah.
So that's my number 5. Jacob, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is, on the show a lot, I rave like a madman. And one of the things I'm known for raving about is how much I want to play Skate 3 again. So my number 4 is Skate 3.
I thought you would have put it in the 3rd spot for a joke.
No, I had it in the 3rd spot, and I was like, I don't think I can justify putting Skate 3 that high. Just because it's a skateboarding game, but it's probably the most fun I've ever had in a skateboarding game. And to give some context to the situation, I was a Tony Hawk kid for the longest time. Like when I was younger on the PS2, like Tony Hawk was my jam. It was like one of honestly, if back in the day they kept timers on like a PS2, I probably have like over 200 hours in Underground, not Pro Skater. So like I was a Tony Hawk kid through and through, and I remember when the first Skate came out, I was like, that's bogus. Who cares? It's not Tony Hawk. And then eventually I played Skate 2 and fell in love with Skate. And then I got Skate 3 and fell even more in love with Skate. And Skate 3 just has like everything you could want in a good skateboarding game. It has a good character creator. You get to create your own like logos for things. The whole point of the game is to gain fans and sell shirts. Like you're trying to build up a skateboarding brand. And so you skateboard around this college town. There's like a great map to it. There's these amazing skate parks. This was the first game in the Skate series to have the Create a Skate Park. And or it might have been the second one. I forget if 2 had it or not, but I want to say like 3 had the one that was like perfected. And then you could go online and play everybody's skate park that got uploaded there. Like it was just tons of fun. And so I'd say like if anybody's looking for that sort of like extreme sports skateboarding fix, like Skate 3 is kind of the best place for you to do that. So you don't have anything to ask me about Skate 3?
I knew you were a skateboarding fan. I never knew how much of a skateboarding fan, at least in the video game space, that you were. And now I know. Now I know exactly how deep that rabbit hole goes.
Yeah, so that's a lot of the reason of why I rave like where's Skate 3 for whenever a new story about backwards compatibility comes up.
One day you'll get it.
One day. I mean, it's been promised. I mean, even Phil Spencer said something on Twitter about it. He's like, we know that the fans want it. So
you know what? I would listen to Phil Spencer. He seems like a trustworthy guy.
Yeah, but my number 4 is Skate 3. So, Brad, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is Final Fantasy X. It's the first big JRPG that I ever played. Honestly, it's the game that has caused me to love RPGs as much as I do now, especially JRPGs. I don't think I would ever have cared about an RPG moving forward if it had not been for Final Fantasy X. And it's still one of my absolute favorite RPGs to go back and play. I've played that game an uncomfortable amount. I'll put it that way. It's just I've played every single bit of that game. I got all the optional aeons. I wanted to 100% it when I was a kid, because on the original PS2 version, on your save file, in the bottom corner, there was a little percentage thing on how much you'd completed the game. And I never got to 100% when I was a kid. And recently, maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I bought the PS3 remaster for my PlayStation. And when I loaded up a save file, I made a new game, I played it, and the first time I loaded back into it, I noticed they changed the save file, so the percentage counter isn't there anymore. And I lost all, like, drive to 100% that game. But still, it's my absolute favorite JRPG so far, and it really is what made me, the RPG lover that I am.
I'm surprised you're not a 7 kid like everybody else.
See, I didn't play 7 when it had come out like everybody else did. I was still not interested in RPGs at the time. It was mostly shooters and stuff for me. Right. But 10 was the first game I had played, I think because my cousin had picked it up. Either my cousin or my father, I don't remember who bought it. But they had brought it, and I played it, and I loved it. It was awesome. The turn-based combat system was nothing like I'd used before.
That's interesting. I've always wanted to try to get into those games, but I just never could.
I don't know if 10's a good jumping-in point. I'm sure there are better games to illustrate JRPGs better, but that was my entry point. And, you're always biased towards your first.
Right, yeah.
But that was my number 4. Jacob, what is your number 3?
So I kind of cheated with number 3. I'm not going to lie. Just because these two games are so entwined for me, because I played them both at the same time. Like, I kind of just went from one to the other. And those two games are No More Heroes 1 and 2.
Okay, at least they're the same franchise.
Yeah, it's not like I picked two completely random games.
I thought that's where you were going with this for a second. I'm like, oh, he sneaked in a top 6.
Yeah. No, well, it is in a way I sneaked in a top 6. But I had played these games, like, literally, like, in a row into each other. We talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show. I had mentioned it in our weird segment that's never come back called Recommendation Corner. I also said Recommendation Corner, so clearly I'm having a stroke. But No More Heroes 1 and 2 is the story of Travis Touchdown, a anime-loving weirdo who buys a lightsaber. I mean, in the game it's called a beam katana, but it's essentially a lightsaber. And he buys it off the internet, and then one night gets into a bar fight with a guy and becomes the number 11 ranked assassin. And so then it's his way to the top to try to become the number 1 ranked assassin. And it's insane. It's very anime inspired. Like, you can tell, like, as somebody who now has started watching anime, I can really see like its weird inspirations in there for like some of the stuff. Like, all the characters are really crazy and have these insane like superpowers essentially. And even like Travis has all these fighting moves that he can do because he's watched a lot of wrestling videos.
That's awesome.
And it's just like, this game is like crazy. It's violent, but it's not like violent in like the way of like it's super gory. Like, at the most it's like giant blood spurts. And the way it is too is like every stage is like perfectly designed for each character. Like, each character has their little arena, and from there it has really good aesthetics to it. So like, one boss in particular is Dr. Peace. He's his boss fight takes place in a baseball stadium because he says like he's a fan of baseball. And all of his little minions are baseball dudes with baseball bats that you have to fight. And then same thing where there's another character named Shinobu who you have to fight at a school, and you just fight a bunch of little schoolboys. It's very interesting and very fun to play. And then you fight these dudes and you get finishing moves on them, and then blood flies out of their heads with coins, and you get coins for killing all these people. In the first one, you have to do these side jobs in order to make money to do the boss battles, which was kind of a drag. And then they kind of took it out for the second one, and you're like, oh wow, you can just kind of breeze through this game though if you do that. But in the second one, they fixed up the mini games, because in the first one it was a lot of just like mow grass and you make money. Whereas in the second one, they became these 8-bit little fun retro kind of things. So like, he'd become a cook and it'd be like burger time or something like that. You know, it's so 2 refined a lot of the stuff from the first one. But I'd still say I think the first one's my favorite one, just because it has some of the better bosses in it. And so yeah, so if you got a Wii, I'd say dust it off. You can probably find these games pretty cheap at like GameStop or something like that. And give these 2 a shot, because I think you'd really like them if you're into sort of Japanese stuff or anime or violence.
They sound right up my alley. They sound like just sort of that crazy fun that you could sort of expected from those, like, not really beat 'em up, but more goofy action style.
Yeah, and it uses the limitations of the Wii pretty well, because it has a really cool little kind of, it's kind of cel shaded art style, but not really. It in a lot of ways it looks just like an anime. Like, I could totally see like a No More Heroes anime coming out and it being really cool. So yeah, they also did a PS3 version though, which I feel like takes a lot of the charm out of the graphics of the game. So I'd say stick to the Wii version.
Stick to the Wii versions.
Yeah,
something nobody's ever said before.
Yeah, I'd let you borrow it one day, Brad, if you wanted to. I think you'd really enjoy it.
If I had a Wii, I would.
Oh, that's right. You don't have a Wii.
I don't.
But yeah, that was my number 3. So what's your number 3, Brad?
My number 3 is Mario 64 on the Nintendo 64. And for no other reason than it was really my first video game. It was the first game that I have memories of like actually playing consistently. Like, I played that game all the time. I wasn't very good at it because I was a kid, but I played it constantly. And to this day, it is one of the only platformers that I enjoy. And really, in Mario 64, there is no other mechanic other than platforming, right? You get the hats, but they just change the platforming a little bit. It's just a big 3D platformer.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's honestly one of my favorite games, and I was looking around for my N64 for no other reason than to play this again, and Pokemon Coliseum. But yeah, that's my third game is Mario 64. Pretty simple reason on that one. It was my first game.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, like you say, you always remember your first.
Yeah, if you've noticed a theme with my favorite games, they're usually the first of something.
Yeah, that's a good thing to put on the list. I thought about putting a couple Mario games on the list, but I couldn't figure out which one I wanted to put between. It was either between 64 or Galaxy.
Galaxy's a really good one.
I also had Kart DS on there because I think that's the best version of Kart.
If I had to pick a card, it probably would have been Double Dash on GameCube. I loved that one.
I do love Double Dash, but I feel like DS just like nailed it.
I never played the DS one, but that was my third. So Jacob, what is your second?
So, as many of you may know, I'm of course a Marvel boy for life. But my favorite superhero is Batman. And so for a long time, we got stuck with these really shitty Batman games. Like, just some of the worst games you'd ever play. Like, the closest we got to having a decent Batman game was Batman Begins, which is based on a movie. So you can see how good of Batman games we had before that.
When a movie game's your top, you're in trouble.
And so we then finally got our saviors, known as Rocksteady, and they came in and made Batman Arkham Asylum, which is my number 2 game. I just think this game is like... It's an exercise in some of the best game design you can ever see in your life. The fighting is perfect. The gadgets all feel like they're necessary to the game. It's not this kind of thing of like where you play a game and, you know, sometimes you get like these weapons that you're like, why would I ever use that? It's not as good as this one or whatever, right? All the gadgets feel like you need them in some way, shape, or form. The enemy design is really good. Most of the time you're fighting these little grunts, but they're all really smart because there are these little bits where you have to stealth around because they have guns, and obviously you're Batman. You can't really take on guns, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're still just a dude in a suit.
Exactly. So like they're very smart and they can be tricked and like made scared so that way they make mistakes, and it's such a cool system to it. I will say the final boss fight in this game is not cool at all. Like, it takes all the coolness from earlier in the game and kind of ruins it by just, like, having this really contrived boss fight. And, like, the voice acting in it is just perfect because they got basically everybody from the animated series to come back. You got Kevin Conroy as Batman, who's the definitive Batman, and you have the best Joker of all time, Mark Hamill.
Yep.
It's just, I can't praise this game enough. It's like a 3D Metroidvania in a way, because you can go back to areas earlier now that you have gadgets and get into secret areas, and there's all these amazing Easter eggs in it. There's like an Easter egg for the second game, like before they even knew they were going to make a second game. It's like, it's crazy. It's a great game, and I feel like I'm just preaching to the choir with this one.
It was so different from anything that series had seen before. It was really just a breath of fresh air that they really, really needed.
It was even so different just from superhero games in general, because for the longest time, we were just like, I mean, like, in general, the best superhero game we had up to that point was, like, Spider-Man 2.
Yep.
Which was just because, like, the swinging felt good, and it made you feel like you were Spider-Man because you could stop random crimes, but, like, this feels like they took... It feels either like a long episode of the animated series, or it feels just like they took a really cool comic book storyline and made it into a video game that's fun to play. And so, just because I love that feeling, it gets a spot on my list. So that's my number 2. Brad, what is your number 2?
My number 2, now this is where my list gets kind of screwy. So I had a tough time with the first 2 spots. So much so that I would say that my 1 and 2 are completely interchangeable. They are that close. Mm-hmm. But for what I have sitting at number 2 right now is Dark Souls.
Right.
And I don't think I've ever had a game grab me so quickly in terms of just in its entirety, its lore, its mechanics, just everything the game did. I was all about it. And I enjoyed the series more and more as I progressed. I was really harsh on 3 when I first started playing it, but after I'm about 60 hours in, give or take, and really it is just a super polished version of the first game, albeit it is sped up a bit, but just it's so much fun, and they're just super rewarding. I've never played a game that rewarded you as much for practice as the Dark Souls games. Specifically, I would say the first and the third reward you for practice the most. And it's absolutely just a pleasure to have found these games.
You should check out Demon Souls, which was kind of like the precursor game to all these.
Yeah, I've seen some Demon Souls. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I've heard like it's the harder version of Dark Souls, which makes me not ever want to even look in its direction.
Dark Souls is not nearly as difficult as some people would lead you to believe. It just takes a little bit of practice. It's like riding a bike.
Yeah, no, I fully get that, like, it's definitely, it's the kind of game that if you actually put time into it, you will have fun with, but it's the kind of thing of, like, I look at it and I'm like, you know, I barely have time to play the games that I want to play now, let alone if I'm gonna, you know, put all this time into it. But I completely get it. I think the game design in that game is great, and I fully just get that I'm the weirdo in this situation.
You're not as weird as you might think. I'd argue might actually be in the majority of people, because not a lot of people like the Dark Souls games, just because they are really punishing. But for me, a sign of a great game is when it has me looking up the lore outside of the game, and Dark Souls is one of the few games to have me do that. That was my number 2. Jacob, what is your top game of all time? Your number 1.
So I went back and forth with this one a lot. In a lot of ways, like how I did with the original, like when we talked about Rock Band earlier, how I said I picked that one because it's the definitive version. I thought to myself, should I just pick a certain game in this franchise because it's technically the definitive version of it? But I was like, no, I'm just going to pick my favorite. And my favorite game of all time is, can I get a drum roll, please? GTA Vice City.
Oh.
Dun, dun. Why GTA Vice City? Well, number one, it's like the first GTA I ever played. So once again, you never forget your first.
Yep.
That's a virginity joke. It to me does the thing that I think GTA does better than any other game series besides maybe Mafia, and it captures a time period. It captures the 80s in such a way that I you know, you don't think possible in games, let alone, especially at that time. But, like, even movies up to that point, unless they were made in the 80s, feel like they never captured the 80s right. And even now, like, I watch movies that are like, oh, this is the 80s, isn't it crazy? Look at us poking fun. Look how crazy these outfits are. Like, I hate that thing. But, like, the thing about GTA Vice City is it just takes place in the 80s, and that's fine. You know what I mean? They don't draw attention to it. It's just like you're in Miami, everything's neon, you own a nightclub, the music's great. The weapons are really varied in it. I like that a lot. There's like all different kinds of weapons in this game. It's the first one that felt like it had a really good story. At least just like going off of 3 and 1 and 2 after the fact, because at the time, like I didn't even play the story when I was a kid. I just sort of drove around for hours, and that even says something to me about the game, to the fact where I could not even play the story in this, and I'm still compelled to keep playing it.
Yeah.
It's got everything that I kind of look for in a GTA game, let alone just a game in general. Like it has a sense of joy about it that I feel like a lot of games are lacking now. You know what I mean? As games are getting a lot more self-serious. It's weirdly enough, I think the most jokey GTA in a way. Like, it's the one that has the funniest characters and has the best situations, and the music is just like, it's like if you took a greatest hits of the 80s and just said, we're going to put this on a disc.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the atmosphere is because of that music, I'd argue. Because of the fact that they're in the 80s, that's why they're sort of lighthearted, because that's kind of the way it was.
Yeah, and there would be times where I would just play that game and just drive around the map just to listen to the radio. Just because I just loved that. Especially, like, as a kid, like, not knowing any of that music and discovering all this music. It's really informed a lot of my musical taste, and that's something that all the GTA games have done, but a lot with Vice City. And that's why I always say, like, the 80s is my favorite decade of music. Is just because of all the hours I put into Vice City. Like, you know, I said earlier, like, I probably put 200 hours into Tony Hawk Underground. I probably put something like 500 hours into this game. Like, I played this game a ridiculous amount of times. This was like the game that brought me and my dad together in a weird way. It was like we would just sit on the couch and we would trade back and forth and play and get on these like these insane rampages with the cops and stuff. A lot of great father-son bonding.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the kind of thing of like, it reminds me of that childhood nature, and it's always been my favorite GTA, and I think it always will be until the day I die, unless there's some insane. Well, I mean, even then, right? Like, look at 5 now. It's like it's this amazing, like, innovative game. Like you look at Vice City, you look at 5. It's like no question, one is better than the other. But I don't know. I just love Vice City so much more. It's always got a place in my heart, I think.
You can never get rid of the bias.
No, you can't. That's the thing. I'd be a terrible critic if you wanted me to rank the definitive GTA list. I'd always just put Vice City at the top.
That's why whenever I rate things, I'm always very adamant in the fact that I have 2 ratings. One that I call the honeymoon rating, and one that I call the legitimate rating. The honeymoon rating is how I feel about it, and it's very rarely ever based in fact. And the actual rating is if I were to truly judge the games. But really, the honeymoon rating is the one you want to see.
The honeymoon rating is the one I think that matters the most, at least to you as a person.
Yeah, individually, you want the honeymoon rating. But if you're, looking for prospective games, usually you don't want the honeymoon.
Yeah. But, so my number 1 is Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Brad, what is your number 1?
My number 1 top game is Halo 1.
Ooh.
Surprise to nobody, I don't think. I've said how many times I've loved the Halo franchise, and 1 is, in my opinion, might be the best game in the franchise. It was my first sort of quote-unquote adult game.
Right.
Because I wasn't terribly old when the first Halo came out. I was old enough to play on an Xbox and all that stuff, but I hadn't played anything terribly serious up until that point. And everybody in my family played Halo. My father played Halo, my cousins played Halo, and this was pre-Modern Warfare, of course, so this was when I discovered that I had sort of a knack for shooters, because I was able to beat them, despite the fact that I was the youngest one of the group. So, I discovered a new talent of mine, which was, I was pretty decent at shooters. It was my first sort of adult game, so I felt like I was playing with the adults now. And the lore of that game, it was absolutely awesome. Like, it was one of the few games that, again, silent storytelling, like we talked about with Doom. Master Chief very rarely says a word up until the later games. And in the first Halo game, Cortana is almost your entirety of interaction with that game. And as you're going through, especially as a kid, you feel like Cortana's your friend. You feel like you are the Master Chief, because Master Chief doesn't really say anything, so he could be anybody. But Cortana's talking to you, and that sort of personal aspect to it really drove me to just look into everything about that game. I have Halo books sitting behind me because I'm so into this lore. It's absolutely incredible, and to this day, the lore is probably my favorite part of the Halo game, and it all started from the Cortana thing.
It's always something that I've said whenever Halo comes up on the show, or if we just talk about Halo personally, is like, to me, like, I love the Halo lore and I love the story of Halo, but I just don't like playing Halo. And so, like, a lot of that story was enough to keep me playing those games. You know what I mean? Like, I started with 3. We were talking about this earlier. I started with 3, went back and played 1 and 2, just because I wanted to know what the Master Chief was like up to the point of Halo 3.
Yeah. It's really the characters are what drives you to do that, and really you get a bigger emotional impact with each one of the games as they progress. I would argue 4 and 5 stuttered a little bit, but in terms of story, every Halo game is solid. It's really just a fantastic franchise, and the first one is what started it all for me. That is my number 1. But like I said, it's super, super close between 1 and 2 for me, if that gives you any indication of how much I like Dark Souls too.
So like we said in the beginning, this is not the definitive list. The only way you're ever going to get a definitive list of our favorite games of all time is if we're on our deathbed, because then we'll not be able to play games anymore in general. But as of right now, these are our favorite games. We'll probably revisit this topic at a later date to see if anything has changed. But yeah, so do you want to give them the spiel, Brad?
Sure. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at completewithdlc@gmail.com. Send us your favorite games if you'd like. We'd love to hear it. Have a conversation with you about that. You can follow the show on Twitter for all show updates. And if you want to talk to us personally, you can talk to Jacob at itsjaygriff, ITSJAYGRIFF. That's ITSJAYGRIFF. He's most active on Twitter, so you can find him over there. You can talk to me on Twitter as well. I'm Kalgne, Kalgne. That's KALGNE. You can also find me on Battlenet. I am Brad, #1261, 1261. Come play some Blizzard games with me. If you want to find new episodes of the show, you can find them wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or SoundCloud, or any of the affiliates thereof. Let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. Leave us a review so we can improve the show. And if you like some of these little bonus episodes that we're doing, let us know. Maybe we can make it a more frequent thing.
I like this. I had fun with it. I'd like to do it more.
Yeah.
Something of this, of this nature. Who knows? Maybe in the future we'll do it by system.
That could be pretty fun. I think that would be a little more challenging for me because
Would be.
I can tell you right now, it's going to take a really fantastic franchise to knock off any of these 5 games for me. So I don't know if this list will be changing for me anytime soon.
Spoiler alert for the PS2 list. Vice City will probably be number 1.
Probably. But
In all honesty, Rockstar will probably just dominate that list. But
Rockstar had a lot of great PS2 games.
they did. That's when I think they really shined. It was the PS2 generation.
Yeah.
But wait, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say we were rambling a little bit. We should wrap up.
That's what I was trying to do. So these have been me and Brad's 5 favorite games of all time, and this has been complete with DLC. That guy over there, that guy's Brad Knight. This guy here, Griffin. Thank you for listening.